Hello Paul, it's Will Beacham from ICIS Chemical Business. I wonder if you can give me your outlook for 2010 for the global chemical industry. Will there be sustained recovery in all regions, would you say?
Unfortunately, I don't think so, Will. What we've seen over the past 12 months is destocking followed by restocking. And some people, I think particularly in the financial community, are confusing restocking with recovery. We don't see, in any market, apart from possibly China, any real increase in demand. If you take numbers, something like, for example, the housing market in the States, which was doing 2.2 million housing starts a year, is now down at 600,000. If you look at autos, was doing 15 to 17 million auto sales a year, now down at 10 million. Now, do we seriously think that this year we're going to go back to 2.2 million housing starts in the States and 17 million autos? No.
No.
And that was what a recovery would mean.
Yeah.
I think, I think we've bottomed, and I certainly hope we're going to see a bit of growth.
Yeah.
But I don't see that we're going back to where we were before.
Okay. And looking at Europe and the US in particular, how healthy is the outlook for those regions? Bearing in mind the Middle East capacities coming on stream and the economic outlook.
Yes, I think there's been a lot of confusion about the Middle East. There's some reason, I'm not quite sure why, people seem to start thinking that this Middle East capacity was going to come online into end of 2008 and 2009. And so they've been very positive recently, saying, oh, obviously come online, and it hasn't been a problem. That's never been our forecast. You kindly interviewed me when we published our Feedstocks for Profit study 18 months ago, and we always said that that capacity was going to start ramping up now, and of course also the Chinese capacity is coming on. And that's really still what we see. So you're beginning to see SABIC Tianjin, for example, started up, Petro Ruby has started up. These plants are now going to come on stream. What's that going to mean for Europe and the States? It's going to mean much tougher competition, obviously. It's going to mean a change in co-product values, because liquid feed crackers aren't going to be able to run as hard because ethylene is coming out of ethane-based crackers. So we're going to get some volatility in markets here, and we're going to have to learn to live with that, I think. There isn't a rule book where we say, oh, this is how it was 10 or 20 years ago, it'll be like that. I'm afraid this is new, and we're going to have to feel our way through.
You think there'll be a lot more closures in Europe and the US this year?
Very difficult to predict closures, particularly on a short time scale. One or two smaller plants might shut, like Dow's styrene plant, for example, has been announced at Terneuzen, one or two like that. But most plants are connected into a refining complex. And to shut a refining complex is a very big deal, because obviously where do you get your diesel from, where do you get your gasoline from? And it's, naphtha coming out of refineries maybe 10% of the total. So you're not going to stop a refinery just because you're having difficulty on naphtha.
Okay. So looking at China then, the figures seem to suggest that it just keeps on growing. What's your outlook for China this year?
I'm very sorry for China. I'm very worried about China. I think they're doing the best they possibly can. At the end of the day, a year ago, they were faced with a total collapse of their exports, which was 37% of their GDP. Exports were down over 25%. So people came back from Lunar New Year, and they'd lost 25 million jobs. So what could they do? You can't force people to buy from you overseas if they haven't got the money to do it. So they stimulated the economy, $580 million worth of local stimulation, cutting duties, giving people incentives to buy appliances, cars, all these things. And they also lent out an incredible volume of money. I mean, the Chinese economy is about the size of the German economy, just $4 trillion. They lent out over $1 trillion worth of money. Now, a lot of it went into speculation. In the end, as they're now doing, you have to rein that in. And the problem with a bubble is that when you burst it, the air doesn't just hiss out slowly, it goes rather suddenly.
Yeah.
And what else could they have done, you ask? Very difficult indeed. They're in an almost impossible position.
So do you think the bubble's going to burst this year?
I think it's already starting to the Chinese themselves. The government this week has been reining in lending and starting to move up reserve requirements, as I've been commenting in the blog. So they're aware of this problem. They're not, these are not stupid people. They're very aware of it, but they just have very limited options. Longer term, China is a very good growth story.
Yeah.
That growth will move to the rural areas. Yeah. But in the short term, can it be the locomotive for the world petrochemical industry? I'm sorry, I don't believe it.
Okay. Well, longer term then, looking at the whole chemical industry, is there much grounds for optimism from, say, new sources of production?
I actually do believe there are. I think that the issue of carbon footprint is going to be something that's increasingly important for the chemicals, polymers, petrochemical industry. Because here we're looking at a complete change in the way that we make a number of things, in the way that we run our society. So we want to move away from the quantity, 17 million autos, for example, in the States. Instead, we might be doing 10 or 12 million, but they're going to have fuel economy much greater. The legislation that's now been passed, so it's on the books for 2016, 42% increase in fuel economy. That means much less steel and glass, got to be more polymers.
Yeah.
So you might be selling only 2/3 as many of the autos, but you'll probably be selling twice as much of the polymer. Insulation in housing and construction, another growth market. A lot of opportunities like this, but we just have to get through the next couple of years before we can really start to see those benefits coming through. But it does mean that you can't just slump down and say, I'm going to get through. You've actually got to invest as well if you're going to position yourself for the real recovery when it comes.
Okay. Thanks very much, Paul.
Thank you, Will.